What is up, true believers? It's Mason here with Comics and Crosses, where we discuss the eternal truths behind our modern mythology. And today I thought I would bring back a blast from the past, but not from my past, because I just reread this great story using the DC Universe Infinite app called Green Lantern Rebirth. And this is a story from a little while back by Geoff Johns with art by Ethan Van Scrivener. I gotta say, it's a great story. Geoff Johns is really one of, if not the penultimate DC writer. He really brings in all of the richness of these characters' comic book history and takes it somewhere new and progresses them forward. I loved his JSA run. This is a great run that I just wanted to get back into. And also, while reading it, I really felt that this was something that had a great Christian message behind it. There's something to really examine in the rebirth, in the resurrection, if you will, of Hal Jordan, Green Lantern. So let's get into it and talk about this story, and maybe you'll feel the same as me, and maybe you'll see this story in a whole new way you never have before. Okay, so first of all, little short bit of info about Green Lantern Rebirth. This is a comic storyline that came after Hal Jordan, the great Green Lantern, had become a villain, become Parallax, destroyed a city, destroyed the Green Lantern Corps, ultimately died in the process. What happened after, and for a number of years, you may remember reading comics and seeing Hal Jordan joined with the Spectre, a character from DC Comics that is a spirit of vengeance and is usually bonded with a human host to keep it from being all vengeance and no fun, and have a little bit of human heart and grounding to him. So this is where Hal Jordan's spirit went after those terrible events, after he I think ultimately became repentant and saved the day by sacrificing himself. But, a lot of damage was done in the process. So this brings you up to Green Lantern Rebirth, which was meant to be a story about Hal Jordan returning to the DC universe as a Green Lantern. However, in this story, we start off with Hal as the spirit of vengeance. The Spectre spirit is sort of demanding even more from him than typical, and is kind of becoming all more and more consuming. Anyhow, all this stuff aside, Hal Jordan ends up having to face Parallax and the spirit of vengeance, and sort of reconciling these three different parts of himself. And what we come to find out is that Ganthet, one of the guardians of the universe, guardians of Oa, he has preserved Hal Jordan's body and had a sort of plan to deal with Parallax. The Lanterns ultimately have to face Parallax. They band together, and Hal Jordan ends up finding himself back in his body, back with the Green Lantern ring on, and fighting, using his willpower to make things right and restore kind of a more strong status quo for the Green Lantern Corps. This was a great story. What I noticed about it was that it felt like a event kind of story where there's kind of a big thing happening, had a beginning, middle, and end. And the ending didn't feel rushed. I felt like they really kind of gave 2 full issues to sort of the climax of the story, which is great because I feel like a lot of comics nowadays tend to kind of have a last issue where they cram everything in, and it feels like all this buildup is sort of anticlimactic. So great on Geoff Johns for doing that. Now, Christian ideas and themes within this story. Obviously, Hal Jordan was dead, and now he lives again, like Christ Jesus, who was dead and now lives forever. This idea of rebirth, they say that in comics, no character is ever really dead, and that could be because of multiverses, multiple endless universes, and can be because of, all kinds of crazy things that happen in comics where characters come back from the dead. But in this case, what I like about this resurrection story, or this rebirth story, is that there was a sense of kind of sin and atonement. And it's interesting because Hal Jordan, not only does he have to fight to come back, but he has to face this fear, Parallax, which is kind of like the light spectrum, the yellow light spectrum of fear, the embodiment of fear, the spirit of fear, if you will, that had taken root within Hal Jordan's heart and within his soul, really, and caused him to go down a dark path, hurt people he loved, and even destroy, I think, his home city. I mean, there was a lot of extreme things that happened because he let fear take over his identity. So there's a really cool, I think is in issue 4 when the Spectre and Parallax, and so this vengeance, fear, and Hal Jordan himself are all kind of fighting to rid themselves of one another. So, which is pretty dynamic and pretty, actually, there's a lot there because Hal Jordan's trying to find himself separate of the need for vengeance and separate of the overwhelming influence of fear. And so, obviously, in Christian teaching, we're not pro-fear because kind of like in Star Wars, anger leads to hate leads to fear leads to suffering, that kind of thing. But also, in Christian teaching, Paul admonished his disciple, his mentee, Timothy, God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and soundness of mind. So these things are actually playing out in this comic story, which is really cool. And in facing the reality of what he has done because of fear, and also kind of facing what he's been doing because of this idea of vengeance, which, it's interesting because the Spectre makes some comments about serving the Lord in his vengeance, but vengeance is the Lord's. So that could be a whole interesting conversation in and of itself. But Hal Jordan does face his sin. He does face his fear and what it's led him to do. And in doing so, he finds he's able to separate himself from that, which is, this is actually more of a Christ-like picture than I think people would realize just in, yes, he came back from the dead. That's kind of the obvious rebirth, resurrection idea. But did you know that Jesus actually had to face sin itself, that he went into hell and got the keys to hell, so that the idea there is that people were not fated to hell and eternal suffering because of their actions, but rather in facing their actions, in facing their sins or what fear maybe had led them to do, the wrong things in their life, actually by facing them, confessing them, and humbling themselves before Jesus, they then could have new life as well. So actually pretty profound, pretty powerful that Hal Jordan had to do that before he could come back to life. And I think it was great. It made for a great story. It made for both physical and internal struggles that I think that's where people really start to relate. Those struggles that are both in the physical realm and those that are in the spiritual inside in your soul, where you must face your own wrong deeds and the things that you regret, the things that you wish you could change, and the things you cannot change, and the future of where you're going to go. So this was a great story. I think a great hero's journey and a great hero's redemption story, which I think we all know a lot of heroes' journeys, kind of becoming a hero in the first place. But this was great because it was it modeled that. It was like a hero's journey, but it was a hero's redemption journey, which is great. I think we need more of those. I think instead of all this negative, postmodern kind of like all heroes are flawed, kind of heroes doing unsavory, awful things, and us just kind of having to say, yeah, well, that's the way the world is. I think it's really inspirational to see a hero's redemption story. So maybe more of that. I mean, this came out a while ago, but that's my thought. Maybe some more of that. So I enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed this story too. I hope you liked looking at it, and maybe it gives you some more respect for Hal Jordan. He's got a new series coming out by Mariko Tamaki, with DC, and also Jon Stewart has another series coming out by Philip Kennedy Johnson, who's one of my favorite comic writers right now. So, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you liked this. I hope you enjoyed it. And, God bless. I will see you next time. Peace.